Hey Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. It really does help me out a lot. So I'm actually just going to introduce this topic because it's obviously a dynamic situation. As you've seen from the title, are we entering a recession / depression, and how will this impact clinical research? So since I think I've been saying this since like 2018. Since 2018 until this year, every year, so 2018, 2019, 2020, every year has been busier than the previous. And I think last year was record high for life sciences as far as business going on, business development. I think a lot of the post-COVID deal flow started happening again. I know from anecdotal experience at my site, Yuma Clinical Trials, we're still seeing, right now it's June 2022, so historians will record. So I put myself out there. June 2022, I'm still seeing site selection visits, feasibility questionnaires. Matter of fact, we just had one 3 days ago. I'm here in Tucson right now for a business trip, networking, and there's studies going on. So if you are old enough, like me, to remember the 2008 Great Recession, while life sciences was relatively, compared to other industries, less impacted, there were still impacts. I remember as a site owner, again it's anecdotal, I would see two things on a regular basis for like 3 to 6 month period. All studies I had getting canceled, and CRAs, I think it was like a good 10 to 15% getting laid off. Now, those CRAs were able to find jobs again within 6 months, 12 months. The industry recovered, our industry recovered relatively quickly. So that was the Great Recession. The differences between that and what's happening right now is that happened, and I'm not an economist, but that happened because banks got over leveraged and the housing crash took a lot from their balance sheets. So their lines of credit to pharma companies and biotechs basically dried up. They couldn't do it anymore, but rates were still kept low. What's happening now, 2022, we're paying the price for what happened in 2020 during lockdowns when the government was issuing trillions of dollars to companies, individuals. I mean, we've spent, if you look at a graph, the US government spent record number, basically printing money. That's catching up in the form of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. And I don't want to get too much into finance. There's way better channels than mine for that on YouTube. But it's important to note the differences. Another main difference is, and I think this recession, maybe even if we get to depression territory, will definitely affect consumers, the average Joe and Jane, much more than Pfizer or J&J. Who's going to get affected in a higher interest rate? And by the way, rates are still going up. I mean, the Fed just yesterday raised 75 basis points. So the rates are just starting to go up, in my opinion. Again, historians will record. I could be wrong, but I think the rates will just continue to go up. I think the Fed said something about we're not planning on easing the rates until 2024 at least. So you got a high interest rate environment. I think it's going to affect the biotechs a lot. Although if you look at some data shows that biotechs actually do well during high interest rate periods. But I think that article and those kind of articles should be taken with a grain of salt because those are more established biotechs. Those are biotechs that already have multiple products in their pipelines, and they're just still hitting their catalysts. Like they announce positive phase 2 data, so they're able to go to phase 3, or maybe they announce positive phase 3 data, so they get approval. All right, that's very different, and those are usually publicly traded biotechs, and those already have established arrangements with big pharma usually. So it's not unusual for like a big pharma like Pfizer to find one of these mid to late stage biotech companies with 2 or 3 interesting products in the pipeline and say, hey, we want to collaborate with you, so we'll help pay for a lot of the costs. In exchange, we'll share royalties. Sometimes there's just M&As, mergers and acquisitions, occur. That's for the established mid to late stage biotechs. I don't think they're affected. The ones I do think are affected are the early stage biotechs, the ones with just an idea, or the ones that are not even on the public markets yet, or maybe they're just like a penny stock, like over the counter. Those ones tend to do horrible during interest rate rise. Why? Because investors are less willing to pay for future growth in a high interest rate environment. It's safer to just get interest rates. When interest rates go up, bond yields, dividend yields, you tend to shift to safer stocks because it's more of a sure thing, as opposed to like hoping, when interest rates were 3%, now they're around 6%. Now that biotech has to grow almost twice as fast for it to make sense to an investor. Again, just basic economics here. There's a lot of nuances there, but these early stage biotechs, they're gonna have some problems. So at the end of the day, it's gonna weed out like a lot of these ideas and companies who are formed around like ideas that are not well established, and it's going to increase I think the market share for the bigger pharma, so the rich get richer, and a lot of these mid-stage and late-stage biotechs that are going to have some success, whether we're in a recession or not. A lot of these studies are already going on. These studies are not like just quick studies. These are like, some of them are year-long, multi-year-long studies. So the budget has already been accounted for. The public markets and biotechs have been getting hit too, right? But the money is there, the investors are there if the results are promising. So I'm holding one biotech right now, AQST, Aquestive Therapeutics, been getting hammered this last year, but I really believe in their IP and several of their IPs. And just yesterday, they had news that, and I think it went up like 15% on a down day where the rest of the market was down. So there's still appetite for innovation. It's just, it has to be well established. And this is a company that's been doing this for like over 10 years, maybe even 15 years. So it's not like they're brand new. I think it is going to hurt the early stage biotechs. Second point I want to bring up, and I'm going to go more in depth on this on a podcast, because I'm actually going to do like way more research. I've been trying to find articles. It's such a new thing in the news cycle that there's not really much commentary on it, so I wanted to get out ahead of the curve. In short, I'm not concerned as somebody in clinical research. Here's why. We're at an all-time labor shortage in this industry for CRCs, for CRAs, for any position, any role in research. CROs, with the business they already have, are so behind. I know one for a fact, but I suspect other big CROs are doing this. They are hiring, there's such a competition for talent. They are hiring CRAs and signing them on with signing bonuses, and they don't even have them deployed yet because things are moving so quickly. There's so much demand from sponsors for existing studies that they're just being paid to sit around, and they're not even deployed yet. So that should tell you what kind of a labor shortage we're experiencing, and sites experiencing the same thing. My site keeps growing. I just hired my second employee 1 month after hiring my first employee. I know it's anecdotal, but so the labor shortage, the fact that the higher interest rate environment is going to affect the average Joe and Jane more than big pharma, unlike the Great Recession, where interest rates were not necessarily going high, but what happened was money dried up, credit lines dried up, banks were struggling. In this case, I think it's slightly different. And I think our industry, remember, let's not forget, Big Pharma is coming off of historic high revenues due to COVID, due to the pandemic, due to vaccine revenues, due to treatment revenues, all related to COVID. So they're sitting on, like, go look at Pfizer, go look at J&J, go look at Moderna, look at their balance sheets, all-time high cash on hand. That cash needs to be deployed somewhere, especially in a high interest rate environment. All right. They typically, what they do, they're not banks, but I think they will take over the role of the venture capitalist and early stage financiers for these early stage biotechs. So there's still a situation where these big pharma actually help the smaller biotechs. It's not help, they're not friendly. It's all for, they're going to be able to leverage and negotiate super favorable deals for them. So those are some of the key points. I think the industry is going to continue to grow. We've got mRNA platform that's going to keep that alone. The mRNA platform, whether you're a fan of it or not, it's got a lot of issues and needs to be worked out. But that is part of my point. They're not abandoning this idea. They're going to keep researching this for the next 10 years. They're also talking about testing the vaccines and treatments in younger people, kids. So they're going to continue. The work is going to continue. The labor shortage is still there. The biotechs will keep innovating. There was talks of the pan vaccine. There's talks of treatments. The mRNA, immunotherapy is huge. Monoclonal antibodies, anything that ends in MAB, showing significant promise. That cancer study where they had like all 13 patients, complete recovery, all right, complete response, never seen before, even if it was a smaller study. But this MABs, this monoclonal antibodies, they've been working on these things for like over a decade. So now the results are starting to mature. We're understanding, investors see, okay, this is a platform that's worth investing in, just like the mRNAs. So those 3 areas alone, combined with CRISPR technology and combined with all the innovations happening in central nervous system disorders and the microbiome research, there's a lot going on. And yes, no industry is immune from a recession, but the Great Recession showed us, even when the pharmaceutical industry was in a worse situation financially because they were more dependent on the banks back then. Even then, we were sheltered. In this one, we're coming off of all-time highs as far as revenues are concerned for a lot of these pharmaceutical companies. And what we're going to keep seeing, in my opinion, is more innovation. Now, the counter argument is, well, consumers, if there's going to be inflation and it's hurting their pockets for things like food and shelter, are they still going to spend on medications? And the answer is yes, if they have to. Now, obviously, if there's something that they can get generic, they're going to get generic, and so will the payers. But so there might be a little bit of a slowdown, but if there's enough of a value as far as the IP is concerned, payers are going to be forced to pay, and patients are going to continue to need those medications. So just my thoughts, nothing to really worry too much about, especially in the micro, meaning right now it's June 2022. I think between now and the end of the year, the labor shortage in our industry is still going to continue. Like they're behind. Now let's see if the supply catches up as far as the biotechs. The biotechs are important to watch, especially the mid to late stage biotechs. And then if those perform well, it's going to be a trickle down effect for the early stage biotechs, which I think are going to be affected, at least initially. So in the micro, don't worry too much about it. Get in, establish your skill set, get your transferable skills, become as much of a generalist as you can. In the long term, pay attention to these things, but look at the growth areas of our industry. And I'm also thinking, what does this do to the tech? This industry's been investing a lot in tech, decentralized trials, electronic everything. I think that's going to continue But I think a lot of these early stage tech companies, if they're not providing ROI, I think they go out of business because investors don't have the patience anymore to wait 10 years, right? They want to see a return in 24 months. So it's going to be interesting to also see what happens to the tech space within our clinical research infrastructure. And I'll keep reporting, I'll keep doing podcasts on it, and I'll definitely keep learning along with you as we go. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. Like, subscribe, comment, share. It's getting hot here in Tucson, Arizona. I'm at my Airbnb. Apologize for the background noise, but wanted to get this video off early for you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.